So this session of the day is called Inculcating Character, and I'd like to start by reading from Galatians chapter 4, just one verse to you. My little children, for whom I labour in birth again, until Christ is formed in you. Now, the word here, formed, is from a Greek word, morpheo, and it's in bold contradiction to the word schema, which also means formed. Schema signifies external or outward form or outward appearance, but morpheo, which is the word here, refers to an internal reality. It speaks of change in character, becoming conformed to the character of Christ, in actuality, not merely in semblance. This verse shows me, as an educator, to pray for the children in my care and to yearn for the qualities and the attributes of Christ to be formed in them. I'm to take my part in the process, it seems, and my part is to labour, to travail, to play a mother's part in fashioning or shaping excellence of character. Now, this is not achieved by observing some external code, but by practicing and learning to let Christ live through you. So as an educator, I am to concern myself with God's word becoming incarnate in my students, and to consider the young children in my care as being under construction, with Christ's likeness as the objective. This, of course, is a long process, but I've got news for you. We have a long time with our children, don't we? And as Alistair pointed out this morning, if a student starts school at, say, let's 3 or 4, and finishes at, say, 19 or 18, we have about 14 or 15 years of opportunity to mould and fashion the character of Christ. Inculcating character, then, is to urge and impress our students to make choices for good as normal daily habits. That's a task. It's a privilege, and it's not to be taken lightly. No wonder the Apostle Paul refers to it as travail, the unconditional love of a parent. The father heart of God is most definitely needed to train children to maturity. So, Christ-likeness ahoy, this is our objective. We're setting sail on this great sea of a journey. Alas, how can we possibly do it? How can we navigate it? It's too big. Well, that's where the ACE programme, the School of Tomorrow programme, comes to our aid. First, let us just be assured of the curriculum, the educational package, being of a thoroughly excellent and rich standard. The mind will acquire the knowledge and facts and stimulus that the growing, inquiring child needs. And the process and the system and the method of training that surrounds and supports and works this, that is what will inculcate character. From the first building blocks of a young preschooler to the final certificate of a student preparing for university, college and the workplace, all the academic needs of the child will be satisfied. At every level, material is appropriately grouped and organised so that the child is offered a full educational entitlement that satisfies his expanding mind and provokes his intellectual inquiry and develops a knowledge base of the world around him from every angle. From the outset, Foundations are securely laid in maths, English, social studies, word building, science, and literature. And through the mastery learning system of PACES, information is expanded and built, block by block, pace by pace, day by day, year by year. So, with this assurance of the educational excellence behind us, now let's take a whistle-stop tour through those 14 years that chart, that navigate from beginning to end. What are the methods that we use to create and form and fashion character in the process of learning the academics? Let's start at the beginning, with the preschool, where meekness is modelled. This course is a 4-manual, 60-pace, students' basic course for life. The little preschooler comes for his first experience of the world beyond his home. He's extending his influence base and his input. He's ready for others to speak into his life. So let's set some rules for him. Let's look at rules as tools. Now, these rules are not religious laws. They're rules used as tools, knowing that the attitude of the heart will help the aptitude of the mind. And a child who is most willing is often a child who is learning most. So, he learns, number 1, to be honest and polite. See, I'm just miming that, to be honest and polite. That's how we might demonstrate that to a student, being honest and polite. For his life to be transparent before God. For him to be truthful in every situation, both alone and with others. To be caring and trusting. That's his first rule. Rule 2, to hear and obey. See this action I'm showing. I know these are simple things, but these are the foundations of living that if the children learn when they're little, will ever grow with them as they grow up. So he's learning rules. He's learning to understand how to live them out. He learns to hear and obey, to submit, to yield. If he won't submit to you, a supervisor who's caring for him, that he sees, how will he submit to God, who he doesn't see? So he learns to hear and obey simple instructions, simple tasks, carrying them out, completing them with a satisfactory conclusion. This submission shows him how to relate to those in authority, how to be respectful. 3, his third rule, he's learning to be kind. To be kind. That probably says it all, doesn't it? Really. Thinking of others as more important than himself. To be generous. To wait in a queue. Not to push or be selfish. To be thoughtful, tender-hearted, perhaps even courageous. To swallow his own wants for somebody else's wants. He learns to take time. Take time. He learns to be sure that behaving safely as he takes time. That's what he's doing, being safe. He's being thoughtful. He's thinking before he acts. He's completing his task to a high standard because he's taking time over it. These things sound like just learning skills, but they're not. They're character choices. They're motivations of the heart. And his 5th rule, he learns to take care. Take care. He learns to look after possessions around him. It's not just some public property that belongs to somebody else and I don't know who, so we can treat it the way we like. No. To play with things properly and put them away. To take care of possessions, to look after books and be good stewards of the environment. Yes, rules as tools. You see, all the while, the student isn't learning about Jesus or about character traits or even about rules. He's simply living, and he's living to the full. And now that's just the method of what he's doing. On top of that is the joy of the paces, the activities, the friendship, the fun, the drills, the songs, the games, the stories, the break times, the craft times, and all that's in the package at this stage of his life. Those are the substance of his academic package. He's learning how to carry all that into life values, into lasting, eternal things of character, so that what he knows can be utilised in a way that will be valuable to the world around him and the people around him. Then he's ready to move on to the ABCs, where discipline is developed. So we're still on this 14-year diary, and we're at the ABCs. This is the Learning to Read programme. In the preschool, the children are learning the concepts of reading and being prepared to read. But in the ABCs, students learn to read and they learn to write. And I do say that quite categorically. This course really does enable them to do that. Isn't that a marvel? We read about students who are 14 and 15 and can't read and write. That's a sad thing, isn't it? But in this ABCs programme, the students on this course learn to read and write. It's a phonic course, and every day this course weaves its way through about 20 little routines or activities, and the only change from day to day is the new daily phonic sound. The student becomes very familiar and safe with the pattern of the day, which gives him plenty of scope to concentrate on learning the sound. That's the new bit for him. He's so familiar with what's coming next and with what to do that he can make responsible decisions and adjustments on how to be, not just his doing, but his being, his character. In the ABCs, every single day, the student learns a Bible verse, which illustrates a character trait of Christ. These verses appear in ever-extending form at every level of the whole ACE School of Tomorrow programme. So this constant washing of the water of the Word enables students to develop life convictions on the attitudes and actions they choose to live by. So, what are fences and gates? Well, in the ABCs, the student is given one short, sharp scripture with an explanatory character trait, and that short, sharp scripture is also given a story, examples, and opportunities throughout all the exercises of the day. And as the supervisor or parent lovingly guides the child, this is the way, walk in it. This is the way, walk in it. She is providing a boundary, a fence, around a field, as it were, a field of experience with a gateway of choice in it. How to respond in a situation. So an example might be, and this is an example from the course, if you're offered a plate of biscuits and one of them is broken, of course you'd prefer to have the one that isn't broken. Isn't that funny? Tiny, ridiculous illustration, but you'd prefer the one that isn't broken. But let yourself be last and have the broken one. Now, I'm not talking about self-sacrifice. It's just about being free enough to enjoy other people's pleasure. There's the field, and there's the gate. There's the opportunity, and there's the choice. Let's go through, not over the fence. If you go over the fence, you'll have to go in that field again, won't you? We know that. So, As the student is busy learning to read his phonic sounds and his look and say words, and enjoying the exercises that will enable him to master the course, at the same time he's enjoying the truth of the word and enjoying that broad place that living in the truth brings. And even though he might look as though he's been restricted by let's do this, let's do that, he's actually learning a choice. It's the Deuteronomy 13:19 choice. I set before you life and death, choose life choice. The choice is being given him, and he's learning to say yes to life. He's learning to discern between good and evil and to choose good for his life and for those around him. Now that's quality of character, isn't it? So, the student has done his ABCs. He's done his 12 foundational reading paces from the word building. He's done his 3 double sound paces. He's done his post-test. He's passed with flying colours. He can read, he can write. He's on the route to independent learning. So he's welcomed into the learning centre. Another big step in his life. And here, his character is cultivated. He has meekness behind him, we hope. Meekness, of course, is ongoing once it's experienced, isn't it? Once it's understood. And he's teachable from his time in the preschool. He's understood discipline and choices from his time in the ABCs. And character is being cultivated here in among the younger ones of a learning centre, or the younger ones in your home. This is largely cultivated through PACE procedures. Literally, the system of the books of learning. Not the actual content necessarily of the PACEs, that would be literally the learning, the academic supply, his growth in his mind and his understanding. But no, on top of that, beside it, underneath it, all around it, is the development of his character. He learns to be responsible for setting his own goals. That involves him deciding what to do and doing it, preparing himself for checkups. That's being responsible for having his learning quizzed. He's responsible for learning his English and maths rules, to say them fluently and willingly. If it says learn, then learn. Don't we read things sometimes and not realise in the Bible that they're a command to us? Let's practice seeing what it says and doing what he asks. So if it says learn, learn. He tests himself with his own self-test at the end of every pace of learning. He's responsible to be sure that he hasn't just learnt something, but he's really taken it on board. He has to set his goals, to plan to cover pages, to stop at a sensible place, to have his work signed and approved for creativity, and to show he's done his work in order and thoroughly, and as unto the Lord. He learns the great principle of responsibility and accountability. He has to score his own work. He learns integrity. He learns that his life is like an open book, and that the choices he makes will affect him and others. He learns to relate openly to others, to his supervisor, his parents, and he learns to enjoy the joy of learning and of being rewarded for his learning, and the joy of congratulating others for their learning. All these are part of the process and the procedures of the daily management of his own work. You see, it's not just a packet of curriculum. It's much more than that. It's a process for life. And his results are all recorded down on a goal check report. That's his accountability check. That's him learning that the things that are expected of him will be inspected. What a good management principle that is. And all this summarised on his student progress report at the end of term, showing the proof in the pudding. Yes, his results reflecting the excellence in personal management choices that he's learning to live in. Then he's ready to step up. Yes, this step up into servanthood secured. He becomes a senior in the learning centre or a senior on the homeschool programme, and here servanthood is secured. I want to look at one specific system that's promoted. It's actually promoted at all ages, but I'm going to put it under this umbrella particularly. In the Senior Learning Centre, the students continue with their PACE procedures, although their PACEs extend into electives and into courses of study which are called credits. These add up to a student achieving a measurable level of learning. Now, one of the motivators that inspires children's output is called the privilege system. And I want to talk about this system next. Because it's not just a motivator, it's a character trainer. Basically, a student can earn a privilege, and there are requirements for this. There are actually 3 levels of privilege: A privilege level, C privilege, and E privilege. But I'm going to look at the highest incentive, E. And there are 6 things that a student must do, all great servanthood securing motivators. I'm going to look at those 6 things briefly. 1, he has to learn by heart that month's Bible passage, probably 20 verses that are said daily in an opening exercise like an assembly. He has to learn that off by heart. That's going to be about 11 chapters of the Bible every year. I think that's really exciting. That adds up to an awful lot over 14 years. 2, he has to gain 2 stars or rewards. In some schools, this actually has to be above 95% for e-privilege. That's a great gain, 95%. If I knew 95% of everything that I've learned, I'd be very pleased. And in our universities, you know, you only have to have 40% to get a degree. 40%. Well, we believe in 95% for e-privilege, and 80% is a learning to allow you to move on. I mean, learning must be learning, surely. Not it just passing you by. So, this is his point 2. Then he's learnt his Bible passage and he's gaining his 2 stars that are above 95% to be on e-privilege. And these 2 stars represent 2 packets of accelerated Christian education. That's what the word PACE means. 2 books, packets of accelerated Christian education. And he successfully completed those to a high standard. 3, he has to have no demerits. In short, that means he knows his boundaries and he hasn't crossed over them. 4, he has to have maintained academic balance. In other words, he's making his choices responsibly to set his daily goals in all his subjects. He's not deciding to do lots of English because he likes it and no maths because he's not so hot on maths, you see. He's deciding he's got to have a good, stable diet. He's learning that he needs to have his cabbage as well as his chips, basically. And he's doing that. He's eating both, steadily working